Hello, everybody. My pleasure to be with you all once again. By once again, of course, I mean having been with you yesterday as well. I very much enjoyed our time together, as I always do. So thank you for joining me once again. I wanted to have an open session. We haven't had one of those in a while. And even though we take questions wherever I can, and we have the Christian Witnesses of Jah Live discussion, which is kind of open, but like I've said before, more specific, usually to activities or beliefs or things related to Christian Witnesses of Jah, but not always. So, let's see. Looks like there may be some error. I'm just verifying. I may have to just restart real quickly here. Oh, okay. I guess not. But for whatever reason, I cannot see myself. Well, I can, but not on YouTube. It's telling me that feature's not working. So it's not showing what I normally see. That's why I had to stop and say, okay. Okay, good. Well, as long as you can see me, then we're good. So as I was saying, before I got distracted by the notice I'm looking at from YouTube, we haven't done an open session in a while, and it's a good show for us to basically talk about whatever you want, in case there's things that I don't get to, right? Sometimes I miss stuff. Excuse me. Or I don't see certain things in time before the end of the show. Maybe I see them, right after or later. So, and that just happens. And so this is an opportunity for me to maybe catch up with some of those. I do have one text I'm going to bring up in just a moment. In fact, we'll go ahead and I'll just bring up the Bible Hub. But while I do that, I'll go ahead and say hello to everyone. Good to see Bankhead and Sonia. Wisdom, right? See, it's a compliment, Sonia. Sonia Carbajal. What's up real quickly here? And Everett Commodore. Very nice to see you three. Betsy. Good to see you, Betsy. And Barnabas. Very nice to see you. Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad, Everett and Betsy. Thanks for confirming. I don't have the usual confirmation. So I can't tell, but I can see I'm connected. I just can't see me to verify it, but you're telling me I'm there. Looks like we're recording, so should be good. So open session basically. Now, give you guys and other people a chance to join and, put your question down if you want. But let me go ahead and bring up a text I have presented before. It's not like brand new. I think what happens a lot is people forget, some things really, I think, people ignore, right? And they just keep repeating the same question or position in spite of a text you have given that explains your position and shows or shows their view is wrong. So, we get texts where, for example, in the book of Revelation, chapter 3, Jesus says he's going to make the enemies of the Christians from the synagogue of Satan come and worship before the disciples' feet or before the Christians' feet, right? And so this is an example. Oh, I can see we have Dada back there in my own offline device. So we have examples where the word for worship is used. Proskuneo is the typical verb. There are some other words that can be used as well, but that's the word most often used and pointed to by Trinitarians and others in texts where they claim it means he's being worshipped as God. They don't make any distinction between the worship Jesus being given and what God gives, neither in the type of worship or the reason for the worship or the difference between how the people worshiping them would see, for example, the Father and the Son, similar to how people who would worship at the feet of the Christians would recognize a difference between them and Jesus, even though it's allowed. And we have many, many other texts that show this. Right? And I've written about this issue in my books, in other writings, and in several videos. We recently did a video on two texts, one of which was in Revelation chapter 5. We really talked about the whole chapter. Because Trinitarians there claim Jesus and the Father God are being given the same type of worship by all of creation. And of course, as we've shown, not only are they failing to recognize the all-inclusive language used there with an explicit exception in both parts of Revelation chapter 5, right? It's the same exception, the Lamb. And it's because he conquered, right? They don't understand that the reason the Lamb is being given, it first explained in Revelation 4:11, like we talked about in that video. Pretty recent. If you want to see it, just go to the live video section. You can't miss it after about 15, 20 videos, maybe less. He's being given that in Revelation 5 because he conquered. He had to die, literally had to die faithful. Just like Hebrews 1:4-5 says, he made a purification, sat down at the right hand of God, became mutability, became better than the angels, showing mutability and a difference between the time he was on earth and then died and afterward, which is also true in Philippians 2, right? He was in the form of God, took the form of a man, faithful until death, raised up, given a position, name above every name. It's the same thing Hebrews 1 says. Inherited a name better than the angels. He didn't have that name better than the angels before that, Trinitarians. He didn't have that position before he conquered, Trinitarians. So there's no way even the exact same actions by the exact same people to both God and the Lamb is the same. It explicitly states in Revelation 4:11, God is worthy because he created, katizo. You know, the verb that's never used of the Son and his action toward creation? Kind of like ek, Trinitarians. But in Revelation 5 and elsewhere, Revelation 2, Revelation 3, Revelation 1 even, right? Firstborn from the dead, ruler of the kings of the earth. I was dead, but I became alive. And now I have the keys of death and Hades, right? So it's all throughout, in particular, the book of Revelation, leading right up to chapter 5, where no one among creation can open the seals of the scroll, right? God is not even in an option in this question about who's worthy to open these scrolls, because he's the one determining who's worthy, number one. And the condition of worthiness here is that you had to die faithful to God. So this whole idea of excluding Jesus from creation because all creation is honoring him because he as a creation died faithful is so ridiculous. It's just like their failure in Colossians 1, right? They don't understand firstborn. They collapse over to Panta, even though firstborn is literally used in the same context in verse 18 to mean, birth from death. And Tapanta is used several times in verses 15 through 18 and 20, right? Even beyond that, we showed. It's all throughout Colossians 1 in ways that show there are obvious exceptions that Trinitarians just selectively accept or don't according to their doctrine, right? Their interpretive skills are not, and it's about the doctrine, which is why they don't have any basis for why they make the decisions they do except their doctrine. So it's really weird. And of course, we've shown, just like with Eve, numerous other examples in the Bible of individuals who are considered as apart from the all, right? Eve's called the mother of every living thing. Obviously, it's not Adam. Obviously, she's not the mother of all the spirit beings. The Trinitarians are amazing when they go through this process of all or non-exclusivity, right? They just can't figure it out. It's either agreeable to their doctrine or forget it, right? Trinity. Whereas we can just show, we can show the context and the reasons why we're saying there are exceptions or not exceptions without requiring our doctrine to be used to interpret everything. Unbelievable stuff, right? Okay, so we have all that. But then Trinitarians, well, no, that's all everyone's worshiping them at the same time. Same way. Trinity, right? No, again, everything I just said, plus. Plus. 1 Chronicles 29:20. A text, again, I've cited in all three of my Jehovah's Witnesses defended editions. Referenced in my debates and brought up in my videos, and it's not like a secret text, everybody. But Trinitarians, I got you guys. I'll just keep you guys right there on the little chat, although it might give me a little more room. I'll do that. Let me move that over a bit. Just move this here, because you guys can't really see your comments that well anyway, and probably you're not going to read your comments on the screen. You can see the live chat later. But this way I can make this whole screen bigger, like that. And let's go to the multi here. Right. Okay. So we have 1 Chronicles 29:20, right? Why can't Trinitarians recognize texts like this and other texts that clearly show that the same act by the same people at the same time in the same place can be done to two individuals without them? I mean, the way Trinitarians think is so strange. So you got to force them to see how these terms and situations are depicted and used in the Bible. And then like I said earlier at the start of the show, they just forget. And a year or so from now, talk to them again. Revelation 5, Colossians 1. Yeah, we've talked all about those texts and showed how you guys are totally gone when it comes to what they say. You force a meaning onto firstborn that's not in the Bible, that it's non-temporal. Even for figurative subjects, it's always temporal Trinitarians. Same with son, right? It wouldn't even matter. Any temporal term, character, all of it, right? Trinitarians just pretend that's not what they mean, right? It never is going to mean that because of Trinity, right? Not because the terms don't mean that, but because Trinity doesn't mean that, right? All right. 1 Chronicles 29:20 and this whole Revelation 5 thing, the Trinitarians go off the edge almost always over because they have collapsed when it comes to understanding terms in context. But again, the whole issue is that God is worthy because he created Katizo, Revelation 4:11. The Lamb is said to be worthy because he conquered. That's why he got the name. That's why he sat down on the throne. Revelation 3:21, Trinitarians. Used it on the watchtower, but that's for chronology. When it comes to you, it's Trinity. See, he conquered and then sat down on the throne. So you see, Trinitarians, it's not his human nature sitting on the throne of God, right? Because then the human nature would be God, right? But even according to you, the human nature is not God because it doesn't know all things. It's not greater, it's lower than the Father, all that stuff. It really crazy stuff, right? But he conquered Trinitarians. That's why he's given that by those people along with God in Revelation 5. It explicitly states that. You are worthy because you conquered. You were slaughtered. And with your blood you bought persons for God out of every tribe, tongue, and nation. It's not because the Lamb is God that he's worshipped along with God in Revelation 5. Just as the Christians in Revelation 3 are not Jesus or God because they're worshipped by the enemies of the Christians with Jesus' approval. And here in 1 Chronicles 29:20, Trinitarians, everybody just write this verse down a little bit, maybe in pencil or somewhere, in Revelation 5, when Trinitarians try to say this whole receiving worship at the same time, right? It's got to be the same worship. And same worship going to God. What are you talking about, right? Trinity. That's what they want. That's what they say. Even though the reasons are, again, totally different. Like explicitly stated. You are worthy, Lord God, Revelation 4:11, because you create all things. The Lamb is worthy because it was slaughtered. Totally different, right? Same as in Hebrews 1. Same as in Philippians 2. I would even say Colossians 1, right? Firstborn from the dead along with Revelation 1. It's always because of that, Trinitarians. Never because he's God. That's you. And the later stuff. 1 Chronicles 29:20, okay? Just use that. Probably the best way to show Trinitarians who are confused about Revelation 5 that no. Not only are you not explaining why they're each are being worshipped, totally different, hence it can't possibly be the same. If the reasons are different, Trinitarians, just like the reasons Jesus is allowing his followers to be worshipped in Revelation 3 are different, Revelation 3:9, then why God allows him to be worshipped, same verb, proskuneo, Hebrews 1:6. See, the reasons are different, Trinitarians. So it doesn't matter if the verb is the same. Now you want to say, well, the whole circumstances and all the adulation and, like Sam goes bananas in the multiple verb usage and claims all that's worship, right? No, as we explained in our disintegration video of his blasphemy, those are just verbs used during prayer at times to God and used in many other situations. But Sam is confused about a great many things. Now, others who aren't like Sam and using this whole multiple verb multiple verbs to try to define what is prayer without actually defining the words for prayer. That's what Sam did. Well, the other Trinitarians who are a little more sophisticated, they're just basically saying, look, it's the same setting, right? It's the same people, all of creation, they want to say, even though, again, as we've shown, and in Revelation 5 itself, before the whole prayer stuff, it uses the same all-inclusive language. No one can open it. There's no one, nowhere, anywhere, heaven, earth, except the Lamb. And so it's the exact same thing. It's all-inclusive language with an exception. Right after that. And Trinitarians just, for some reason, think that means he's not a creation, See, by the same logic, Trinitarians would say Eve is not something living because she's the mother of everything living, and she's obviously not mother to herself. Or they'd have to say she's eternal, right? Maybe like part of the Godhead, right? Maybe Sam's Mary worship would mutate into something like that, but not right now. So it doesn't work, right? They have to ignore plain and repeated usage of expressions and terms that make it clear how the Bible presents individuals in a unique way in comparison to others like them. So really in Revelation 5, it's saying who is worthy among all creation, right? Because God couldn't be the one who's determining who's worthy and also become lower than the gods and die. None of that is possible for God. We've talked about it numerous times. So it's discussing who among creation. And then once the Lamb is identified as the one who was slaughtered and who conquered and who is therefore worthy, it refers to the rest of creation. It's just like Colossians 1, and just like Colossians 1 uses all exclusive language with a stated exception. Colossians 1, it's firstborn. Used twice in the very same context. Along with first in all things. That's even more inclusive. The first or preeminent in tapanta, in all things. Colossians 1:18, Trinitarians. That to me, Trinitarians right there. See, they literally have to equivocate on the meaning of all things. Like over and over again, right? It means all things here, it doesn't mean it all there. And no real reason contextually or grammatically, just Trinity. That's it, basically, that I've seen. All right, so this whole 1 Chronicles 29:20 Revelation 5 thing, though, says, Then David said to the whole assembly, Praise the Lord your God. So they all praised the Lord, the God of their fathers. They were reading the NIV. They bowed, right? And so hence Lord for the divine name, right? Obviously, problem there. But let's go on. They bowed down, prostrating themselves before Jehovah. Trinitarians, you're Yahweh, okay? On your best day, translationally, you use Yahweh. They're bowing down. Look, Trinitarians, all the assembly, pasa he ecclesia. You understand, Trinitarians? You understand all Trinitarians? What you keep constantly trying to use selectively for your own purpose while simultaneously ignoring all, no pun intended, the references of all that don't agree with you. Oh man, Trinitarians, look what you've done. So right here, right, we have all the congregation. What are they doing, Trinitarians? They're praising Jehovah, God, and it says here, they bowed down, prostrating themselves. Right here, Trinitarians. Kemsantes ta ganata prosekunesan Kyrio kai to basile. You see, Trinitarians, right here, you have all, right? But obviously, even this, though this is all the congregation, right? Solomon, as king of the congregation, now he's becoming king right here, is still a part of the nation, right? Trinitarians, the nations, the tribes, the congregation. He's just the king. So he's set apart from it here, Trinitarians. He's set apart from it here with Yahweh. Your Yahweh, our Jahuah, Jah in English, anglicized. Got all the congregation, Pasa he ecclesia, Trinitarians. Is that all? Even if it is all, we still know that Solomon would be considered a part of this in a broader sense as its king, right, Trinitarians? Okay, so once again, we get all-inclusive language with an obvious exception. Now, all the congregation are bowing down to two individuals, bowing down and prostrating themselves, Trinitarians. And so Trinitarians really hate this text, I believe. Not only because of the use of proskeneo, right here, the verb they so oftenly cite, like I mentioned earlier, texts like Hebrews 1:6, used right here for both Yahweh and the King at the exact same time by the exact same people in the exact same setting. There's no difference. It says they bent their knees and worshiped Lord and King. Lord, of course, here in the later Septuagint copies that substituted terms, titles like Lord for the divine name, just like in the New Testament later text copies. Either way, right here, we have the exact same thing going on that we do in Revelation 5. We have God and the one whom he has enthroned as king. Here it's Solomon. In Revelation 5, it's the Son who conquered and sat down on his Father's throne because he was worthy and conquered. We have the exact same situation. And we have precedent in the Bible to show you are wrong. Your attempt to use the Trinity in Revelation 5 fails to take account a well-known text in the Bible that shows the exact same people can acknowledge both the King and God in the exact same way while worshiping them. So, Trinitarians, I don't know how long it's going to take you to forget this text. Probably not that long. That's why I recommend everyone go ahead and write this one down. I think you need to put this one in your Revelation 5 references because it'll help Trinitarians, hopefully, better understand what happens when God enthrones someone who's worthy. He allows them to be worshiped along with him by the same people because he knows that those people aren't retarded. He knows those people understand the difference between the one who gives the king the throne and the one who is given the throne. Whether it's Solomon right here or Jesus in Revelation 3, leading to the events of Revelation 5. For some reason, Trinitarians don't quite understand this process and depiction of God and his king in the Bible. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful to you, and maybe I'll clip that as a small supplement to our whole Revelation 5 worship discussion. We'll see. All right, let's take a look at the chat now. I think probably you guys have some stuff in there that I should get to. All right, let's see. So we got hello to everybody. Betsy has a question about surrogacy. Well, Betsy says, question, it's not off topic, Betsy. This is wide open, so don't worry. I just brought that up because I had thought about it earlier. It actually was something that came up in a chat question. So I thought, well, I'll mention it at the start. But No, I'm here for you guys. So Betsy says surrogacy, is that allowed according to the Bible? Well, offhand, I can't think of any text that directly addresses it as a right or wrong issue. However, the most famous account of surrogacy in the Bible would be, in my opinion, Jesus, right? So God the Father used his spirit, right? Just like the Bible tells us in Psalm 104 and Ecclesiastes 12. We covered it recently in our Bible and Treaty and Conflict, part 26. How Jesus entrusts his spirit to God, just like Stephen entrusted to Jesus, showing that they're dead, they're dying. And that there'd be no point in Jesus doing that to God the Father if he shared the same nature, right? Spirit is their nature. Jesus is still God according to Trinitarians. That never stops just because he dies as a human. So why is he entrusting something that he already has as his divine self and never gave up? Because he did give it up. Because he doesn't share the same nature as the Father. Pretty obvious, right? Trinitarians just deny that and say no and then ignore the text. Either way, we were talking about it, and so this whole idea of surrogacy, though, I would say that's a surrogacy, right? God the Father is using his spirit to create Jesus in Mary. He literally created him as a human being, infused him with his spirit. He sent forth his spirit, and Jesus was created in Mary, begotten in Mary. It's the exact same thing, right? If you're begotten inside a human, you are created inside that human. The moment that the man's sperm and the woman's egg are fused together, the woman's egg is fertilized, the creation process of the human being begins. So that and every other example in the Bible of a begotten thing is a creation. There's no exception. Trinitarians just create a category that doesn't exist to fit their doctrine. They have to, right? Because they have to deny what's explicitly taught in the Bible over and over again. It's all part of the later doctrine stuff, right? And so either way, we'll be getting more into that during our Athanasius Review and Refute series, Read and Refute. I'm going to do that here in the next week or two during the week. So I'll be watching for that notice. But it seems like... So the Bible doesn't say anything, and probably because other than God's ability to do so, surrogacy doesn't seem like it would be possible in the ancient world. I'm not aware they had that technology. So it's similar to blood transfusions in that way, right? It doesn't quite technically fit the definition and description of eating blood in the Bible, right? Because if you eat blood, it goes in your mouth and it's digested and it's not blood, right? It's not used as blood when you eat it. It's used for whatever caloric value it might give. I don't think there is any in blood. So it just would be disintegrated in your digestive system. I shouldn't say disintegrated, right? Digestive. Sam and the disintegration, right? The word sticks sometimes. So Watchtower, for example, will say, well, yeah, but it says abstain from blood. And even though the understood uses of blood were basically dietary, that covers everything even in the future. Right? So that's an interpretation. It doesn't say that in the text, and it's not the equivalent of eating blood, because transfusing blood puts blood as blood back into your system, in your circulatory system, sorry, not your digestive system or through your mouth. So they're totally different. They remain different after you eat or transfuse them. So to say that a historical reference to eating blood as a food is inclusive of a future use of transfusing blood as blood doesn't follow. Watchtower wants to interpret it that way, and that's their own view. That's fine. But to enforce that on other people, to require them not to use blood because of a dietary restriction, and to abstain from all uses of blood when in fact you allow them to have blood withdrawn and stored and tested and not just put back out on the ground, obviously goes too far. So surrogacy in the same way, I don't see it as something that directly relates to anything in the Bible other than God's use of Mary as a surrogate for his son, but he actually used her real seed. He just sent forth his spirit to creatively ensure that his son would be the one born through Mary. And so he was created as Jesus at that time, the man. And then he died, and he gave up his spirit, just like Stephen gave up his spirit. The spirit returns to the God who gave it. We talked all about it. Part 26, Bible Intrigue and Conflict. And then 1 Corinthians 15 says God gives it a new body. Physical body dies, becomes just a seed, and the seed is given a new body. So it seems to me like he was recreated in the spirit. God has to send forth his spirit, right? All spirits return to the God who gave it, and if he sends forth his spirit again to recreate that person, that's what happens. That's how I understand it, consistent with the text I've referenced and discussed. So I guess I would just say, Betsy, I don't see anything against surrogacy in the Bible. There is an example where God uses Mary as a surrogate, although she's not entirely right. It is actually her seed, but it's a little different, obviously, than it is her son in that physical sense, but the Spirit of God is beyond what any man could provide in the way that would attach Jesus to her in the same way. He's more attached to the God who allowed him to be born through her. So it is a little different, but it's, to me, the best example of a quasi-surrogate in the Bible that doesn't seem to be a problem. So I just wouldn't take any position on it. If other people think it's wrong for their own personal reasons, people are allowed to think it's wrong or right. I wouldn't go around enforcing it, or certainly wouldn't use it as a basis for judging someone. I don't have a standard for doing that in the Bible. Some medical things just seem a little novel and unusual in ways that we question. Maybe they should be. But if they're not explicitly against what's taught in the Bible, we should leave it up to each individual so we don't fall into the path that the Watchtower fell into. It can happen very easily. Everett, you lost the verses for the adding the name of Jesus, huh? Okay. Well, we can bring that up real quick, right? So there's probably many, but the two that I can tell you about right off the top, we'll just bring it up in Bible Hub so everyone knows what we're talking about. There are a couple of texts that in the New International Version use the name Jesus, but where it's not actually in the Greek text, right? There's a pronoun usually used, which stands in place of a noun. But Trinitarians and others often criticize the NWT because the NWT uses the divine name, where the New Testament, even in a quotation of the divine name from the Old Testament, uses Lord. A title, a substitute. So NWT sees it's quoting the Old Testament where the divine name exists and says, well, okay, we're going to use the divine name there because the New Testament copies we have are later, and we think they quoted what was actually in the Old Testament, the divine name. Well, but critics of NWT will say, yeah, but our New Testament copies, they don't have the divine name. Okay, well, maybe we understand your argument of a quotation, but God translate what's in the text. Translate what's in the text, right, Trinitarians? Well, we are doing that in terms of what they likely put in the text, because if they're accurately quoting it as we believe, not misquoting it as you seem to believe, based on all available evidence of what they would have been quoting, then it's a broader issue in terms of translation than just looking at the text and saying, see? And proof of that is NIV, because NIV is not always translating what's explicitly in the text when it comes to names like Jesus, right? So in John 12:41, talked about this in my John 12:41 video, both recently and a couple years ago, response to Dr. White. But here's one of them, Everett. John 12:41, it says, Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. Now, there's actually a couple problems here with NIV, as I talked about in my last video in response to Dr. White. Excuse me. So right here, you do have Jesus. So here's an example where NIV is saying, well, we're going to use Jesus, even though in the actual text, right, translate the text, Trinitarians use a pronoun, right, him. They saw his glory. The glory of him. So it doesn't say glory of Jesus, even though that is who it's talking about. But that's just like in the NWT when it is translating it Jehovah, when it's quoting where it says Jehovah in the Old Testament, it's talking about Jehovah. So the NWT is saying, okay, well, it may say Lord there in our current copies of the New Testament, but it's referring to Jehovah from the Old Testament. It's literally quoting his name from there. And NWT still gets criticized. Yet you rarely ever hear anyone criticize NIV for doing basically the exact same thing, interpreting what the text says and using a name to represent that. It does it right here in John 12:41. And Dr. White is aware of this, right? He tries to probably this isn't what he wanted, because NIV on John 12:41 is better for him in identifying Jesus that way. But we don't disagree with that, so it doesn't make any difference. But his misuse of this in Isaiah 6, right, versus Isaiah 53. But the other problem with NIV, Everett, before I show you the second that I can remember instance in NIV where they use Jesus, although it's not in the text. So this is the first one, John 12:41. You got to make a file and save it. NIV text with Jesus that aren't, where the NT doesn't use Jesus, something like that. Something shorter. The other problem, like I talked about in my last video on this subject, response to Dr. White, is this. And I literally mean this. This word, this, right here. That. We're using a lot of demonstratives here. That this right here is a plural in the Greek text right here, tauta. He said these things, Isaiah, because he saw the glory of him and he spoke concerning him. NIV mistranslates this plural as a singular because it wants you, the reader, just like Dr. White wants you, the Trinitarian or hopeful potential Trinitarian, they want you only to connect John 12:41 with John 12:40. Or rather, John, they want you to connect it basically with John 12:40. Even though it says these, right, plural. And it says, starting from verse 38, this was to fulfill the word of Isaiah, right? John 12:41 says, Isaiah said these things. So Isaiah is quoted in verse 38 right here. This is the part where he's, let's just go ahead and bring up Isaiah 6. We'll just do an in-screen NWT so we can kind of keep both together right there. In Isaiah 6, right, this is the text that Isaiah, that Dr. White wants us to connect this with right here, or John 12:41 that we're leading up to. But the first quotation here, Lord, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? If you go, that's actually the very first part of Isaiah 53. Who has put faith in the thing heard by us? And as for the arm of Jehovah, to whom has it been revealed? Remember, this was to fulfill that. I explained this very, patiently, I believe, in my last video on this subject. Isaiah is being quoted here to explain the fulfillment of what's going on from Isaiah 53. So he quotes it right here. And then in 39, he says, for this reason they could not believe, because Isaiah says elsewhere, right? So now he's explaining why they can't believe. Verse 38, Isaiah 53, he's quoting Isaiah to explain the fulfillment of what's happening. Then he says they can't believe because Isaiah says elsewhere, he's blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts so they can neither see nor understand nor turn, and I would heal them. And then in verse 41, it says Isaiah said this. But Isaiah didn't just say this, did he? It not only clearly presents multiple quotations from Isaiah, one from Isaiah 53 that explains the fulfillment of what's happening, and the other from Isaiah 6 that explains why they can't believe. And it even uses the plural form in the Greek, but the NIV mistranslates that in addition to using a name that's not in the text. And remember, everyone, as we talked about in that last video I did about this subject, in Isaiah 6, right, this is where that quotation from verse 40 that explains why they can't believe, he's blinded their eyes, hardened their hearts so they can't see. That's from Isaiah 6:10. Make the heart of this people unreceptive, make their ears unresponsive, paste their eyes together that they may not see with their eyes, and with their ears they may not hear, and with their heart they may not understand and actually turn back and get healing. Dr. White and Trinitarians want us to go all the way back to Isaiah 6:1 through 3 and see that as what's being talked about in John 12. When in fact, what John is talking about explicitly from Isaiah 6 is right here in verse 10. And from Isaiah 53, he's talking about the fulfillment of what's happening in Jesus, which right before Isaiah 53:1 and right after it, in the Greek, it refers to the Messiah being glorified. And Isaiah seeing and writing about it. Remember, John 12:41, he didn't just see his glory, but he spoke about him. That's not happening in Isaiah 6:10. There's nothing about Jesus in Isaiah 6:10. That's why John is quoting Isaiah 6:10 here in John 12:40 to explain the Jews why they can't believe. It's from Isaiah 53 that's the fulfillment about Jesus. And that's what John's talking about in verse 41. But he refers to both references, quotes from Isaiah, because he's talking about them relative to Jesus as fulfillment and why they can't believe him. How Dr. White and others get Trinity out of this is a whole nother matter. It basically is just their misunderstanding of what John says Isaiah saw and wrote about. They think it's Isaiah 6:1 through 3. It seems pretty clearly contextually to be Isaiah 52, leading right into the quotation of Isaiah 53:1, and after that, which is all about him seeing the Messiah's glory and speaking about him. Something that does not happen in Isaiah 6. Okay, so Everett, that's one, plus the other stuff, bonus time, right? Singular this for the plural tauta, and clearly multiple quotations made, yet NIV makes it seem like only verse 40. is involved in verse 41. Unbelievable stuff. The other that I'm presently aware of, and again, there may be more, Everett, this might be a good thing for us to separately study and tabulate and update each other as we uncover the NIV's use of names where they're not used in the text, right? Dr. White claimed that it's because of some principle of how far away the pronoun is from the name subject. But this text right here, this next example that I'm going to give you of NIV using a name where it's not in the actual text, is Hebrews chapter 5. Hebrews chapter 5, NIV, right? This is the text that we use to disintegrate Sam and the Shemunian cult's understanding of Jesus' fleshly body. Sam totally broke down and collapsed, right? He tried to say that this is the days of Jesus' suffering, right? He totally ripped out the terms in the text and inserted whole different terms, right? Like his whole attempt to define prayer by whole different words. So a lot going on right there with Sam, but we pointed out that no, the idiom used here, and Sam didn't disagree with the idiom in the days of. How can you? It's very clear in the Bible. He just lied about what in the days of is referring to. It's clearly referring to the days of his flesh in the Greek, right here. Has entais hemerais tes sarkos autou, who in the days of the flesh of him, right? Flesh, just like John 1:14, the word became flesh, Sam, not suffering, Sam. The word didn't become suffering. He may have suffered at some point because of what people did to him. That's not what it's talking about, Sam. It's talking about flesh. No, it doesn't use suffering. You do, because Trinity. But, and NIV is just as bad as Sam, right? In the days of Jesus' life on earth. Well, actually, that's not so bad. I don't think it's correct, an accurate correspondence to flesh, but as a man, man would be better here in the days of his humanity. Because again, that shows an end. It's over. Right? He doesn't have that anymore. Now, actually, NIV is a little deceptive here. Days of his life on earth, right? Because they could still say, well, he's alive in heaven and flesh. He's got his fleshly body in heaven. He's just not on earth, right? But it doesn't say that. It doesn't say Jesus. Here's number 2, Everett, right here. In addition to John 12:41, NIV uses Jesus, and Jesus is not in the text. It's a pronoun. And then it uses life on earth, right? Just like it uses this for tauta, the singular, for the plural, and it's clearly a plural, not only explicitly in the Greek, but the context leading up to it. But NIV and Dr. White don't want you going back to verse 38. They want to keep you on verse 40, Trinity, right? What they think can be Trinity, but it's not. It's from Isaiah 6:10, not Isaiah 6:1-3, Dr. White. But then here, of course, right, life on earth. That's not what it says. It just says his flesh. So NIV has translated his flesh to life on earth. Okay? So I guess if you recognize that that's the only place you could have flesh, okay. But it's still not very representative of the Greek, is it? Neither in terms of the use of the actual name, although I'm not saying it's not referring to Jesus. Again, it's a question of, look, are we going to be allowed to use terms that aren't in the text to represent what the text is actually referring to or not? Trinitarians are the ones that constantly criticize NWT for basically doing that exact same thing. And then they promote Bibles like this that do it also, right? That actually use names that aren't used in the text. It's an interpretation. You're adding something to make clear what you see. Fine. Well, that's what NWT is also doing many times when it uses the divine name in the New Testament. Even apart from quotations, right? This isn't a quotation. So And you could even look at the non-quotations in the New Testament where NWT uses the divine name. We're the most open to criticism, in my view. That's similar to what you have right here. It's an interpretation of the context in a way where they're saying, well, there's no name here. We're going to use one to make it clear. Well, that's what NIV's doing, right here, and in John 12:41. And then you have this whole life on earth thing, but it just says his flesh, right? Let me see here. Super chat. Juan Rivera, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Requesting a PDF. I do recall you emailed me, I think, a couple months ago. I apologize for not getting back to you, Juan. It gets really busy for me, everyone. I do try. Juan had asked about whether we have a PDF copy. And what we have available for purchase is what's on Elihu books, basically. Now, I'm almost done with my Proverbs translation. Oh, you're going to love it. I got 3 appendices, really good stuff. And, of course, the translation. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I will be putting the 3 dissertations up in a PDF. So I've just been wondering whether I should update it at all. Now, I don't think I really need to. It's all pretty up to date the way it is. I could update it. But maybe I'll just do like a corrected edition, a few minor changes, and leave it exactly the way it is and PDF it. And yeah, I'll give you a free copy. No problem, Juan. You super chatted. Very kind of you. Always appreciated. Never needed, but I realize people like to either do it for highlighting questions or requests like this. I'll see if I can get you a copy before then. It's more a timing thing, Juan, and believe me, I'd love to have that up there on a PDF so people could get it real quickly. I just got so busy after I PDF'd, what was it, the 2nd edition. I still need to PDF the 1st edition, right? So I need to PDF Jehovah's Witnesses Defended, the 1st edition, and the 3 dissertations. Those are 2 projects I have to get done. I'll get you an accelerated copy of the 3 dissertations, okay? Of just the way it is now. And thanks for the 2nd super chat. Very, very kind of you. So you got it. Give me about a month. I'll do my best because I can see you really want it and it would help you. And I want to get it up there. So maybe I'll just PDF the actual version that's being sold right now. And then maybe if there's like a couple minor grammatical corrections, I'll do that, but it won't be any changes. I'll just leave it the way it is and put it online. And then if I change it, right, it'll probably be a little bit significant. I could probably add a lot of stuff to almost every dissertation in there and the appendix. So probably it'd be better to make that a 2nd edition and just let it be another version of that. And then you have the original, and then you have the expanded one. That's what I'll do. So I'll be doing a lot more with the Elihu book soon, because with the translation of Proverbs being published, I got to tell you guys, I've had so many things on my, books about Trinity stuff and divine name and other things, Christian Witnesses of Jah stuff, creation, right, evolution stuff. But the translation for a long time now has taken up almost all of my spare writing time outside of the videos and the channel content. I haven't been able to do really blogs or online papers or any other publishable writings because the translation calls me. It calls me to finish it because it is, and it required so much of my dedicated focus and time and the need to be so accurate with such a thing. I couldn't simultaneously do all that channel stuff and that and all my other work stuff and update, for example, 3 dissertations. So I will get you a copy one. Give me up to a month to just get myself in order and do it. I will, though. It won't take me probably that long. I just need to sit down. I think I already have it in a PDF. I just need to maybe do a couple things to make it a uploadable copy, right? Not much. make sure everything is lined up. It'll have everything. I have everything for 3 dissertations, so it shouldn't take me too long. Appreciate the super chats. I will get it to you, my friend. I appreciate it, and I can tell you would benefit from it, right? You'll be able to use it, so I will do so. Now let's see. Let me just see if I missed any other question. We talked about 1 Chronicles 29, right? Revelation 5, how you can be jointly worshipped by the same people at the same time in the exact same way, and there not be an equation, the way Trinitarians like to make it seem. We talked about surrogacy, and Betsy's question, doesn't seem like there's a whole lot in the Bible about it other than God himself using Mary in that way, seemingly in a similar way. So I wouldn't hold it against anyone. Some people may have complications, right, that require that. And then we talked about NIV and its use of names where the name is not actually used in the text, and its mistranslation of the plural pronoun with the singular when the context it's not only explicit in the Greek, it's contextually like obvious that it's more than one reference from Isaiah. And yet NIV makes it seem like just the immediately preceding, like Dr. White's Trinity stuff. That's what they're doing. And NIV's really not proper translation of his flesh here, right? That's life on earth. I mean, come on. Are you a paraphrase or are you a translation? You get a little freedom here. You don't have to say everything exactly corresponding if the meaning is better that way. But I don't think that makes it better. In fact, it seems to interpret it for the reader when you could just say his flesh, right? And that would be enough. We would understand. I think we all can interpret the days of his flesh. There's only one time when he was flesh. Yes, during his life on earth. But that's for us to explain, right? It doesn't actually say that. It doesn't use the word for life, and it doesn't use the word for earth. Days of his flesh, when he had flesh, meaning the flesh is gone. It's over. Not just his life on earth is ended. See, there is a huge difference there. Even though it's true he was flesh on earth, to limit it to his life on earth still allows for him to have flesh in heaven. And that's what they want, right? That's what they believe. So we clearly have doctrinal bias all over the place in NIV. In John 12:41 with the use of the singular for the plural pronoun, and a mistranslation of his flesh with life on earth. And they are not the same and allow for a completely different interpretation of how long Jesus actually had flesh. And yet these people love to go crazy against the New World Translation. And again, I don't claim the New World Translation is perfect. It does, have some flaws, and I will often point them out. But come on, right? The volume of attack. The volume of attack against the NWT has been it's been massive, especially in comparison to the people like me who've stood up against or for NWT and against certain other translations. So it's worth emphasizing where these other translations promoted by these NWT critics are clearly wrong and doctrinally biased, in my opinion. Okay, let's see. Let's take a look and see what else we got that I might have missed in the chat. Meor El Nebuel. Good to see you, first of all. He says, I've biblical Unitarian for many years now and been beginning to see that the pre-existing spirit of Jesus seems to be more in line with the Bible. I agree. I think it is hard to deny, even though some do. I understand, and I understand. Muslims also have a different view of the preexistence of Jesus, and it's not an easy concept, right? It's pretty heavy. However, if you understand Jesus as one of the sons of God, and in his case, one who came to the earth to cancel out the sin that Adam committed, then it makes more sense in terms of the broader equation involving God and his sons, not what we have to go through as humans on a regular basis. So I would bring up Me'orel, Nebuel, a text like John 8:58, right? A text that often, well, it's mistranslated in almost every Trinitarian Bible, except a couple, because they don't understand the idiom involved. That's becoming more evident now to them. And they invent this individual named I am that's not in the Bible. God never calls himself I am. He refers to himself as I am. He's talking about himself being someone, or with a pronoun like anihu, I, he, with it representing an actual naming of him or title of him in the context, similar to what we just saw with the NIV and Jesus. And this is very commonly done. But yet, when they get to texts like this, they collapse, right? They'll come up with a name that's not in the text for Jesus in John 12:41 or Hebrews 5:7 for a pronoun. And yet here, when it says before Abraham was, I am in the NIV, ego me, I am, right? Personal pronoun. And first person verb. They can't translate that in connection with an expression referring to a past time, which is a Greek idiom frequently used that gathers up both into a singular expression. I have existed. I have been. So apart from that issue that I've talked about in my writings and in my debates, in separate papers and in videos, this pre-existence thing, right? If you go back just a verse or two, well, verse 55, it says, though you do not know him, this is Jesus talking to the Jews, I know him. If I said I did not, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him and obey his word. Verse 56, your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. So this is Jesus talking to the Jews, referring to Abraham, their father, thinking of something. The thought of seeing the Messiah's day. Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing the Messiah's day. So how would Jesus know that? How would he know Abraham rejoiced at seeing his day? And that says again, he saw it and he was glad. Your father Abraham rejoiced when he saw my day. The Jews hear him say that, right? They hear him speak those words. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. The Jews hear that and they say, you, talking to Jesus, you're not even 50 years old. And you've seen Abraham? So they clearly understood that he was talking about actually observing Abraham, right? But it doesn't make any sense to them because he's not old enough to have done that. Now, either the Jews are misunderstanding him here, right? It's possible. Or they understood him and they just don't believe him. They don't understand how he could be, what he's really referring to, right? How he could have seen Abraham because he existed before Abraham or during the time of Abraham. So he could see what he was doing. He could see him rejoice. So his response is to confirm that they are correct. Very truly, I say to you, before Abraham was born, I existed. That's what that means. It doesn't even make sense to claim he's calling himself I am here, or even stating an absolute I am. It is grammatically absurd and untranslatable, right? It would mean before Abraham was born, eternal, right? I eternal. Before Abraham was born, I am, right? As a name. Like before Abraham was born, Yahweh, right? It doesn't make any sense. It's just grammatically ridiculous. And that's what Trinitarians have presented in their translations. You want to talk about doctrinal bias. Unbelievable what they've done to the I am sayings of Jesus. In particular, John 8:58. But you see, right here, before Abraham was born, I have existed. Right? That's the answer to their question, right? It's just like in John 10 when he answers them, right, with a text that explains what he's talking about. And Trinitarians are like, what are you to what? Text? Trinity. Well, it's the same thing here. He's just not quoting a text. He's just telling them the truth. You want to know how I have seen Abraham rejoice at the thought of seeing my day? Is that the problem? You think because I'm a 50-year-old, not even a 50-year-old human, that's not possible? Guess what? Before Abraham was born, I have existed, which is true, right? To say since Abraham was born, I have existed, that doesn't make it, he's existed before that, right? We all agree, at least Trinitarians and people like me, that Jesus existed before Abraham was born, exactly like he says, right? I would never say he's existed since Abraham was born. That's not what I believe. He existed, right? That would just potentially mean he grew up alongside Abraham. But it says before. So then he could have been old enough to actually observe Abraham and see him rejoice, which is exactly what he says he did. Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and rejoiced. Clearly referring to things that he claims happened during Abraham's life that are nowhere written in the Bible and that he doesn't attribute to God telling him. The Jews then say, what are you talking about? Seeing Abraham rejoice when you're not old enough. Jesus explains, I am old enough. I have existed before he was born. I'm not just this man you see here today. That's what I've been telling you the whole time. I was sent by the Father. They just don't believe him. I believe John 8 is probably the most powerful text to use to prove Jesus' pre-human existence. It's really impossible to interpret his words that he saw Abraham rejoice at the thought of seeing his day. I don't see how, and then the Jews understanding exactly what he means, like we're talking about, and then him reaffirming that, yeah, I can have seen Abraham because I lived before he was born. I don't see how, where's the burden on those who believe Jesus was truly existing as a real spirit person before becoming a man? Where's the burden on us to interpret John 8:55 through 58 as a pre-human existence spirit person? That's what it literally is talking about, unless you want to believe he was a pre-existent human, which wouldn't be biblically possible or consistent with anything in the Bible. So you're left with spirit, right? You're left with him being either, one of the angel of Yahweh, Michael the archangel, who overseen the selection of Abraham and the formation of Israel, or just the Son of God from heaven observing Abraham. So either way, he's alive before he's born as a man, observing Abraham. The Jews understand his words to mean exactly that, and he doesn't deny or correct them. He reaffirms how he saw a man who lived long before him. And the only interpretation you can reasonably come away with is that he existed at the time the events he said he observed occurred. You can come up with all kinds of other interpretations. That's not what it says, though. It doesn't say anything about God telling him anything about anything other than him observing Abraham react to the thought of seeing the Messiah's day. Literally what he says, what the Jews understand him to mean, and he doesn't correct or deny it. He reaffirms it. So, but people come up with all kinds of crazy stuff, right? And sometimes maybe it's not always all crazy, right? Some of it I think is a little off, right? That doesn't mean I think the people believing it are all crazy. Meor El Nebuel. Some are, right? Like we get people like Sam. But he doesn't represent all Trinitarians. So even if he's crazy, that doesn't mean all Trinitarians are crazy just because they believe in Trinity. In the same way, all those who don't believe in Jesus' prehuman existence, I don't think they're all crazy. Some are. But because they deny things in ways that are extreme and unusual when presented with facts. Normal people don't usually deny plain and obvious information and reinterpret it completely differently, right? That usually requires a doctrinal bias or some other motivation versus just reading the text and then accepting what it's saying. Anyway, I'm glad to see you are thinking more about this, and you're welcome, of course, to join us anytime. All right, let's see what else we got here. Oh, yeah, that's a good point, Everett. Philippians 2 is also extremely good. Let's go ahead and bring that up. For this whole pre-existence stuff, just to kind of round it off a little bit, add a little more data to it, and also address, common Trinitarian misunderstandings. All right, we have a whole video on this text. I've written about this in my defended editions. You can get 2 of those editions online. PDF version of Yahoo Books or Amazon right now. You can get a hardcover edition of the 3rd edition, updated and revised in 2012. And I'll get the 1st edition and my 3 dissertations in digital format online as soon as possible. Right, so Philippians 2:6, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality, or it's NIV. But the text just says, who in form of God existing. Right? Trinitarians often like to use this whole, they just, for whatever reason, and it has to do with their misunderstanding of time and eternity, basically, like John 1:1, same thing. They see a verb like hyparchon, and they claim, well, the present verb means it's eternal. Right? That's not true. Numerous instances of this verb and other present verbs but they see this as like before creation, right? In eternity, right? And we talked about this before, the whole reification of the abstract fallacy. So they'll see any activity in that period or in eternity as eternal. But they somehow try to come up with this connection with the present verb, right? It gets really weird with Trinitarians sometimes. But the Greek literally says, who in a form of God or form of a God, it just says theou, in a form of God or form of God existing, it didn't consider equality with God as, in my view, something to exploit. Okay, a little bit difference in how I would translate this versus the NWT. I think NIV is actually correct in this part here. did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. I think that's actually pretty good. Give NIV some credit right there. Because I think it recognizes the idiom at use here. And that the understanding of harpagmon, right? Something, this equality, right? This is what sometimes confuses non-Trinitarians. Like, how could Jesus be equal with God, right? Well, I've done a whole video on this and explained how equal doesn't mean equal in every single way, right? It really just, the term for equal here, Isa, means like. Sometimes it can mean like exact correspondence, but it very frequently just means similar or like. And it's talking about being in the form of a God, as a spirit. Like John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with the God, and the Word was Theos, a God, a Son of God with the God who is their Father, the one God. But when you don't understand it that way, when you don't use the Bible as the context to explain and interpret these references, and you use later doctrine from several hundred years removed and from a contribution of a pagan emperor, you come up with all kinds of weird stuff, right? But it in the context in which it's written, where the sons of God are gods, it says in the form of a God existing, didn't consider this equality, right? The existing in the form of a God equality as something to exploit. He didn't take advantage of being like God, like Satan did, right? He didn't use it for his own benefit, which he very easily could have, right? If you're existing in the form of a God, like God, as a spirit, God is a spirit, John 4:24. Jesus was raised a life-giving spirit. That's the form of a God. That's the form of God. He is the spirit eternal, and he created other spirits, his sons, who exist in the form of gods. I said you are God. God says in the counsel of God. But Trinitarians often don't understand, in addition to the fact in Psalm 82, in Psalms, the whole book, the references to gods are to angels all over the place, never to human judges. And the whole context is not about human judges being addressed. It's about gods being addressed in the counsel of God. Where did Israelite judges ever meet with God in a council? Unbelievable stuff invented by Trinitarians, huh? Just to avoid the teaching of the New Testament that the sons of God are God. And that's what Jesus used in his defense of the accusation that he was Theos, the very thing referred to right here. The singular non-article Theos. Exact same as in John 10, right here, for Jesus, where he refers to the text in Psalm 82, sons of God are gods, to explain it. And that's why I say, while you could say in the form of God here, because the sons of God are in the form of their father, God, right? Spirits. It could just as easily be in the form of a God, because the sons of God are gods according to Jesus and God. Just like in John 1:1. That's not a problem at all according to the biblical concept of God and his sons. It's just Trinitarians and others who make it a problem because of their doctrine, using terms and concepts that aren't in the Bible or presented as a problem the way they present it. It says he was existing in the form of a God, but he didn't exploit it. He didn't exploit this equality with God. So, there's so much here that creates pre-existence. In the form of a God existing, right? He'd have to be pre-existent for that to be the case. Didn't consider this equality with God as something to exploit. Okay, so what equality could he have with God that he had on earth? Well, John 5 has the Jews in verse 18 saying that he made himself equal to God. But the very next verse, and again, equal, Isa, can mean like or similar, not one-to-one correspondence and everything. So they very easily could have just said, you're making yourself like God. And then in the very next verse in John 5:19, Jesus answers again and explains, I can't do anything on my own. I don't think he's claiming to be equal to God and then clarifying he can't do anything on his own. Now, if they're claiming he was making himself like God, that's what he goes on to say. I can't do anything on my own. I see what the Father does, and I act likewise. Homoios. Similarly, Trinitarians. It literally uses a term that means similarly in the context of explaining what Isa means about Jesus and God in John 5:18 and 19, right? And then Everett was also referring to verse 7 here in Philippians 2. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, right? So you have the contrast here made very clear, just like in John 1, between Jesus existing in the beginning with God before the heavens and the earth were made, right? Because that's when they were made, in the beginning. He's with God in that beginning, according to John 1:1. And then it goes on to describe him becoming flesh. And that's exactly what we have in Philippians 2. He's existing in the form of a God, or God, and then he's making himself lower into the form of a man. Just like Hebrews 2:7-9 says, he became lower than the gods, Trinitarians. So this wouldn't be possible to say this if he wasn't a spirit God like God. It would make no sense in saying he existed in the form of a God and then made himself nothing and took on the form of a man. They're two separate things, right? Like we've talked about. If you're man, you are a man and not a God. Well, we have both things presented right here. Man, right? And form of a man. Homoiomati, anthropon, becoming, right? Mutability right there, Dr. White. And then we have Marphe Theou Hipparchon, right? And in the Bible, you just bring it up real quick. Right here in Ezekiel 28:9, will you without fail say, I am God, before the one killing you, whereas you are a mere earthling man and not a God. So they're two different natures. You can't be both. That's why Trinitarianism is ridiculous. That's what they literally say. Yeah, you can be both and be one person. And guess what? You can be one person with two natures that are totally opposite each other, just like it says right here in Ezekiel 28:9. You're this and you're not that. And even Trinitarians even say, well, you can still be that and one person and know and not know all things. Yeah, absolutely. No, you can't. You're just lying and creating an absurdity. Ha! Unbelievable. And then in Isaiah 31:3, up here, it says, the Egyptians, though, are earthling men and not God. Clear contrast once again. And their horses are flesh and not spirit. The two are not the same. They are distinguished explicitly in the Bible multiple times and shown to be opposites. So when we read in John 1:1 about Jesus being a God in the beginning with God and then becoming flesh, they're total opposite natures. When we read in Philippians 2 about him existing in the form of God or a God and then emptying himself and taking on the nature of a man, they're two total opposites. And I believe, like Everett said, Philippians 2, very powerful text to prove preexistence for that very reason, just like John 1:1 and through John 1:18 for that very reason, and just like John 8:55-56 for that very reason. And I would say Hebrews 1, right? Talks about God creating all the ages, all the things through the Son, and then him becoming a man and purifying us through his death, and then sitting at the right hand of God. It goes through the same progression that we just kind of read about in Philippians 2. So, and that I think you also see in Colossians 1. It starts out with him as the firstborn of all creation, all things being made through him, then him becoming the firstborn from the dead, the first in all things. It's the same story presented over and over again. So I'm convinced 100% in Jesus' pre-human existence. Everett makes another good point. He says at Philippians 2:7, Jesus had to be in existence to think about not exploiting or robbing God, right? He had to be in existence, pre-existence to be in the form of a God or God. And he had to be pre-human existence to be equal to God, right? Or like God in that way. And he had to be pre-human existence in order to think about not exploiting his existence and then taking on a lower existence. It's a choice that Philippians 2:6-7 is presenting. That instead of exploiting his existing nature with God, being like God, in the form of God or a God, instead of exploiting that, he chose to lower himself. So there's definitely thought and awareness in a pre-existent state for him to even consider what to do, which is what Paul's talking about. Have this mind in you, right? Verse 5 is the whole point of what he's talking about. You got to think like Jesus. He was in the form of a God or God. He didn't exploit that equality or similarity with God. Instead, he chose to empty himself and become a man. Good points, Everett. Let's see what else we got here. I want to try to... Oh, good to see Jason as well. Jason says, glad to be here with you. Had some family issues. That they had issues with me speaking against JW doctrine. I need this to be with fellow ones. Yeah, it can be tough. It can be tough. People come to believe in Watchtower. Jason says, hard when my family start to question why you're going against Watchtower. Right. Well, we don't agree with Watchtower. That's true. But we're actually just trying to do what we came to Watchtower to do. And that is worship God and follow Jesus. That's the whole reason I came to the Watchtower in the first place. And then there became all these other things that you start to learn about. And at one point or another, you're just faced with this situation where you either have to continuously justify false doctrine because you think you're so unique and special that there's nothing else to do. You know where else to go, right? That's how they interpret Jesus' words or Peter's words, right? Where else are we going to go? That's how they see it. And they supplant Jesus with themselves, right? They make people think they have to be with them when really we just need to be with Jesus and the Father and with other Christians, doing the things that we're told to do and not running around trying to scare everybody with false chronology. So what happens though, Jason, as you know, is people get caught up in that. Right? It's something that when you believe in its totality, as in association with Watchtower, right? There's a whole package that comes with it. So all your beliefs are associated with Watchtower, Jehovah, Jesus, the divine name, right? They don't see those things existing outside the Watchtower, not in any meaningful way. Now, seeing us is making them a little freaked out, right? Because we're not supposed to be able to do this. They think they're literally the only ones that could possibly be doing this stuff, and they don't even approve, right? They're like, what are you doing, right? Whereas with me, if Watchtower stopped teaching all their false doctrine and just started teaching the truth, I'd be happy, right? I'd be pumped up. Hey, great, that's good for you. And stop now and make sure you reinforce again laws of the land and stop the child abuse and all the other stuff. But I'd be happy about it. You know what I'm saying? They're not. When they see other people praising God the Father, using the divine name, no Trinity, Jesus, they don't like it. It bothers them. And that really tells you a lot, right? They've developed this view of themselves that's really exclusive, and by requiring all that false doctrine in association with true doctrine that you can plainly see on its own apart from anything they teach, the only thing you need them for is all this complicated prophecy and chronology. You don't need Watchtower for the divine name, one God the Father, firstborn of all creation, golden rule. That's easy to see. But they require you to believe that in association with all the stuff that's nowhere, anywhere in the Bible, but that they believe as an interpretation. And that's the problem. Many people have come to believe in Watchtower not because of the things that are true. They've come to believe in Watchtower because of what's not true. Their lies about prophecy, chronology, the great crowd, the anointed, blood, stuff, those things have become just as important as the divine name, one God the Father, Jesus. So there's no difference, right? And that's why it's so hard. See, you're looking at all these clear biblical teachings like we are. And then you're looking at those and saying, okay, that's obvious. I'll do all that. And then you're not seeing all this other stuff that Watchtower is requiring. And you're like, no, I don't need, that's not in the Bible. That's not correct. They're not, okay? They're not doing that. They 100% believe that Watchtower is uniquely chosen to represent God and teach these things. One God, all that stuff. And this prophecy about 1914, all the other dates. So there's no way they're going to understand you or me or anybody else doing anything approved by God outside of Watchtower. It's just not going to happen. So, unfortunately, the best thing, in my opinion, right? This is my opinion. I don't know you personally, so you have to decide. And that's what I would recommend you do after thoughtful prayer and consideration. The best thing I have learned to do with people like Watchtower who just, they're not going to see it in any way outside of the Watchtower doing what we're doing as approved. Best thing is just to do it, to do the very thing that they don't think you can do, which is not appropriate, right? It's a way for them to feel better about accepting false doctrine, basically. Because if it's not them, well, who is it? And if you're doing something without all that false doctrine, well, it could be you, right? It could be us. That's how they see it, versus just people in different groups or in different places doing the best we can, regardless of who we call ourselves, right? They see it as a group kind of identity thing. They don't see it as like necessarily. Sometimes they do talk about accounts like the dragnet, Jesus' illustration, the dragnet pulling up all kinds of fish from different groups. But they see that as ultimately being gathered into their organization. So as a requirement at some point. But it's not going to be easy, unfortunately, for you to make any progress with them at this time. The only thing you can do is make progress yourself. And over time, they might see what you're talking about by maybe talking about it a little less and just letting them think a little bit more. I don't know. Again, I'm just giving you my best advice based on what I've seen and done myself. And I've come to realize it's less is better with committed Watchtower members, unless and until they're actually at a point where they need your help, right? They're starting to see things, cracks and things that are making them, because what's going to happen, Jason, as you know, probably already, and others, at some point, if what you're wanting to see, like them become more like us, believe in these things that are clear and leave all the false doctrine, to get to that, they're going to have a little bit of a rough time, right? I mean, maybe some people can make a seamless transition. They just like see what we or others are doing. They're pumped up and they leave Watchtower and they're just like, go. But otherwise, the connection with Watchtower is so strong and driven into them with this impending doom and destruction if they leave. There's going to be this change, if it ever happens, it's going to be a rough one at some point where they're going to need you or someone else to be there and to say, hey, wait a minute. Okay, you're starting to lose faith in what Watchtower's teaching. That's what I was trying to tell you. You can still believe in all these other things, just the stuff they're teaching that's not correct. I agree. That's why I stopped supporting them. It's not easy because we have friends and family, but I just can't do it. And I can see you're just kind of in the same position now as me. So, I'm here. We can still believe and associate, and I'll show you what I've been learning, and then you can decide what you think about it, apart from what Watchtower's requiring of you that I don't think is necessary. It's in some way it'll maybe be possible for you to help them retain their faith sufficiently after they lose it in Watchtower, because that's what often happens. If you ultimately get them to break free from Watchtower, there's no guarantee they're going to just keep believing the things that are true outside of the Watchtower. The Watchtower and belief in it, right? People do that for a reason at some point. Sometimes we are just kind of caught up and we don't see anything else and it takes time. But other times, that's just what people really want to be true. And that can be even more difficult, but you won't be able to do that much with people who want it to be true. They have to change what they see or want to be true based on the facts, the objective evidence. And that's not always easy to do, or it happens over time. And then when it does happen, as I said, that's a tough time. So they're going to need you probably at some point, either as a good example right now to show what you're talking about, how they can keep worshiping, excuse me. Throat gets a little dry there. How they can keep worshiping God apart from Watchtower. We need to show them. We need to be consistent in our efforts to do the right thing and to provide an option for people who, when they realize I can't support this group anymore, right? I see a lot of good things in the organization. I like some of the people, and some of the beliefs are clearly true, right? Explicit things from the Bible. But all this other stuff and these requirements and what you want us to do, no, I'm not going to do that, right? And so their reaction is going to be like it is, right? They're going to have a hard time accepting you because that's what they're taught, that if you know about it and you don't accept it, well, there's something wrong with you, right? When really there's something wrong with them. They're overcommitted to a group of people who are doing things they're explicitly told not to do. So, what are we supposed to do? Just do nothing? Is that what Watchtower people would want us to do? You want the Christian Witnesses of Jah to just shut down, stop defending the truth about God, stop promoting his name, stop standing up for NWT where it's appropriate? You want us to just shut down so you guys can just have total exclusive control over those things in some way that you envision as being fulfillment of prophecy? No, we're not going to do that. We don't trust you. We don't trust Watchtower to be able to do this properly anymore. We've seen too many problems, too many failures to do what's right, and an absolute ongoing refusal to acknowledge your failures, to stop claiming that you're the same as the voice of Jesus. Recently, Watchtower video, they did that again. They've done that numerous times, right? Got to trust them 100%. God and Jesus, trust them 100%. This stuff that's just 100% not in the Bible. We're not going to let you guys represent. That'd be like letting Watchtower be the sole primary representative of things like the divine name and no Trinity and stuff like that with preexistence, right? and other associated things. That would be like letting Sam Shamoon represent the Trinity and what it means to be a Trinitarian. Okay. Like they're promoting Sam as like the only way to be Trinity. That's sort of what Watchtower wants us to do. Only promote these beliefs through Watchtower. Only promote Trinity through Sam. Right? Like, we've got some pretty bad representatives if that's all we have left, huh? Might be time for the rocks to start crying out. No, we don't have to let a group of people who have failed numerous times to teach the truth about end time events and what God requires and identities of individuals and pressuring them not to partake of the body and blood of Jesus, all because of your failed predictions and refusal to let go of this ever-present last second before Armageddon scenario. No, we don't have to do that and let you continue to bring down the names of God and Jesus because of all that and much other stuff. No more than we're going to surrender that option to Trinitarians. Okay, we're going to do what we believe is correct for what we can show are the right reasons. And if people want to accept it and work with us, great. If they don't, we're not going to hate you. We're not going to reject you. We're not going to shun you. We may not want to hang out with you and like be your close pals, or if you're a known sinner and you're just openly doing blasphemous things, then not even trying to change, become a better person. Well, yeah, well, you shouldn't expect us to all want to hang out with you. Probably not. Right? We all make mistakes. We're all imperfect. But if you're not even trying, you're not even honest about what you're doing and who you are, well, you're never going to fit in with us because we're all confessing and acknowledging who we are through faith in Jesus. And we try to help each other, not tear each other down. You Watchtower people and Trinitarian people, you run around judging everybody all over the place. It's unbelievable. Some of it may be appropriate in some way, but the extent to which you take it is so far beyond anything in the Bible where it concerns the doctrines you use for this kind of shunning or excommunication or rejection as heretics. You're both doing basically the same things over different issues. Let's see if we got anything else here before we wrap it up. I appreciate your time, everyone. Wanted to do a little open session here. Hopefully I didn't miss, I'll probably see later. It's a lot of stuff. Let me see if I can see if I miss anything truly significant. But I always enjoy being with you all and sharing our time together and reviewing these texts and learning more about our God and about Jesus and what he did and how we can be better people, right? How we can live better lives with or without, with Christians and with non-Christians, but without allowing ourselves to become, involved in things that we don't think are good for people. So we want to try to make the best decisions individually and as a group. And as a group, we focus on three things primarily: God of the Bible, Messiah, Golden Rule. And we try to leave everything else up to everyone else for you to be judged individually based on what you choose to do by God and by Jesus. We're here to help other people, not make it harder. Unless you're making it hard on us, unless you have a problem or something where we need to talk to you like Jesus outlined in Matthew 18. But apart from that, no judicial committees here. There's no people running around trying to make sure how spiritual you are, unless it's to try to help you, right? And if you have problems, to try to build you up. But if you refuse to do anything even remotely resembling someone who's trying to be a Christian, well, we have other people who are trying and that we should try to spend time with. But that's for each individual to decide. We don't burden other people with anything but what the Bible explicitly requires. So to that end, I hope you'll join us again, whether it's for another open session or for our next Christian Witnesses of Jah live discussion or for any other live show we may do. If you haven't followed me on Twitter, I do post there regularly. I also post in our community section on our page. As soon as I complete my translation of Proverbs, I will be active on my Watching the Ministry blog again. And And I will also finish the Christian Witnesses of Jah website and try to get back on the Christian Witnesses of Jah forum for more online discussions. Not until I'm done with Proverbs. Too many things I have to focus on. It's not far, though. So maybe soon we'll be able to do some more of that other stuff. But until then, I appreciate all of our time together, whether it's here like this or online somewhere else or in person. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, afternoon, or morning. I will be doing the Christian Witnesses of Jah live shows, the next several shows. I'm going to be doing those a little bit earlier in the day, like around 10 a.m. my time, to accommodate people like Miro and others who have been trying to watch the shows live and partake, at 3 a.m. and all this stuff. And all you who had been used to the 6:30 to 8 o'clock p.m. California time shows, well, you still get to watch the show later. And it's time to give a few other people a chance to be a part of it live. And I'll try to rotate it, right? Like every few months, maybe every 3 months or so, to give others a chance to be involved live. So be looking for that. I'll try to upload a few videos where I have time as well. And until then, may Jah bless you in Jesus' name.